You're redundant. That's how it started. Not a discussion, not a warning, not even a full sentence with a shred of empathy. Just you're redundant. Like some automated system error spat out in human form. Travis Morgan, the new vice president with an ego the size of a Tesla factory and the personality of a damp conference napkin, stood at the front of the all-hands meeting like he was delivering a TED Talk nobody asked for. He had that same smirk you see on middle managers who think crypto is an investment strategy and keep aftershave in their desk drawers for emergencies. Harrington Biotech needs to modernize, he declared, clicking through a PowerPoint where every slide said agile in a different font. We're cutting friction, streamlining operations, and letting go of legacy systems. And frankly, legacy people. That last line he aimed right at me, eyes locking on mine with that smug glint that makes your stomach drop. 2 days later, the calendar ping came through. Join us in HR room 3B. No subject line, no details. That's the room with the cheap tissues and the crying chairs. Travis didn't even sit down. He leaned on the doorway like he thought he was starring in Succession. "Lauren," he said, syrupy smooth, "your role no longer aligns with the company's future goals. We're grateful for your years of service, but compliance is being restructured." I looked at the HR rep beside him. She studied the carpet like it was a legal document. "So you're firing me," I said flatly. He smiled. "You're being released to new opportunities. No severance talk. No transition plan. Just jargon and cologne." He even glanced at his smartwatch mid-sentence, like the man had a more important redundancy to execute. I'd seen more dignity in a Craigslist breakup. I didn't argue, didn't cry, didn't throw anything like Janet from finance did back in 19. I just stood up, smoothed my blouse, and said, "Noted." Then I walked out, quiet as a spreadsheet error. On my way out, I looked toward my locked file cabinet. Top drawer, green tab, marked Federal Grant. Active compliance forms. 8 years of certified documentation, audit trails, and the dull beauty of bureaucracy lived inside. I knew what was in there, and more importantly, what wasn't. That night, I microwaved leftover lasagna, poured a glass of wine, and opened my personal inbox. One new message blinked back at me. Federal Research Grant Portal. Confirmation. Form GR61 submitted. Timestamp, April 9th, 7:42 a.m. That single form was the reason Harrington Biotech still had access to its $12.4 million research grant. And guess whose authorization kept it valid? Mine. Guess what else? It wouldn't take effect until the following Tuesday at 9:01 a.m., which meant that for the next few days, I held a lever Travis didn't even know existed, one that could flip his precious modernization project upside down. I didn't rush it. Revenge, like compliance, works best when documented carefully. The next morning, I returned my badge like it was radioactive, slid it across the HR desk. No handshake, no farewell email, no forced smiles. Just a quiet click as it hit the countertop and my rolling case of binders squeaked away behind me. On my way out, I made one last stop at the compliance cabinet. Drawer 3, green tab, grant eligibility, active. I slid the binder into my case between federal audit responses and Q1 certification logs. There's something deeply satisfying about organized paper, like flipping off chaos, but politely. By 9:35 a.m., I was gone. 10 minutes later, the Slack channels started lighting up. At Compliance Ops. Who's handling the GR61 submission this cycle? At Ops Lead. I thought Lauren submitted it already. At Compliance Ops. Portal says pending. Needs reconfirmation. HR Support. Travis is assigning that out. The real entertainment was just beginning, because that GR61 wasn't just a web form, It was a federally controlled attestation that required clearance, fingerprints, and registered credentials. And clearance like that doesn't appear overnight. But Travis, bless his MBA heart, had just reassigned the task to Brian Carter, a guy who once asked if compliance was just legal's boring cousin. Brian Carter, the same guy who once called a federal background check just a VPN thing, had just been handed the most sensitive compliance form in the company. The GR61 wasn't a cute PDF with an e-signature box. It was a federally encrypted attestation that tied every dollar of that $12.4 million grant to my registered clearance. And now, their new compliance lead was a man who thought FAR regulations meant something about distance. By 10:14 a.m., screenshots from their Slack thread started circulating. Rachel from payroll, my one true ally in that cubicle farm, forwarded them from her personal email with the subject line, "This is gonna be good." Before my access got revoked at noon, I logged in one last time and quietly downloaded a PDF copy of the active GR61 submission, time-stamped, verified, and still pending activation. That timestamp mattered more than anyone in that building realized, because once HR finalized my termination at 9:01 a.m. the following Tuesday, the system would automatically void any submission tied to my credentials. That wasn't sabotage, it was policy. I just knew where to find the clause they never read. Somewhere inside Travis's innovation war room, with beanbags and neon words like synergy stenciled on the wall, there was probably a whiteboard with my name under phase-out. Cute. They could phase me out all they wanted. I had a countdown. That night, Brian messaged Rachel asking where the compliance keys were. She told him, "Lauren always said it's not about keys. It's about knowing which door doesn't lock." He didn't get it, but I did. 3 days later, while I was sitting cross-legged on my apartment floor trying to assemble a second-hand bookshelf, my phone buzzed. Duplicate submission notification. GR61. The message came from the Federal Grants Liaison Office. We received a secondary attestation for Harrington Biotech conflicting with the active signature on file. Please advise who currently holds official compliance authority. I almost laughed. Brian had tried to resubmit the form using his company email, a scanned signature, and a note that read updated submission per team restructure. Original signer departed. The portal flagged it instantly. You can't just edit a federal form like a grocery list. It's a chain of clearance, registration, and verification that takes months. Rachel filled me in later through encrypted chat. Brian had asked in the compliance channel, "Who do I contact at the feds to, become the new form guy?" Nobody replied for 6 hours. Then at 4:16 p.m., the agency emailed again. "Please clarify the conflicting submissions. The individual of record remains Lauren Price." Brian panicked and CC'd his boss, which meant Travis was now in the loop. And how did our fearless VP respond? With an email that deserved to be stitched on a throw pillow. "We're restructuring. She was redundant. We'll re-sign it." That was it. The liaison's reply could have frozen hell. "Please be advised that federal designation cannot be reassigned without clearance and reauthorization. Any override attempt may trigger review. In bureaucrat language, that's a velvet-lined threat." Meanwhile, word trickled through the lab that new supply orders had been paused until the compliance thing cleared. Project leads were confused. Vendors were nervous. I was calm, because bureaucracy may be boring, but when it stops, everything else does too. By Thursday morning, Rachel forwarded me a link to Travis's company-wide webinar about modernizing compliance. I listened in from my kitchen while peeling an orange. Midway through, someone in the chat asked, "Is Lauren still involved?" Travis ignored it, but the silence that followed said everything. Compliance isn't glamorous. It doesn't trend. But remove the one person who knows where every signature lives and watch the empire crumble. Friday morning, I sat in a public library under fluorescent lights that hummed like suspicion. Terminal number 6 sandwiched between a kid watching Fortnite clips and a retiree doing a crossword. I logged into the federal system one last time. 8:58 a.m., 2 minutes before HR's timestamp would make my termination official. The rescind button wasn't dramatic, just a dull gray box. At 8:59, I clicked it. Submission revoked. Timestamp: 08:59:17 a.m., April 16th. I leaned back, steady breath, no smile. 1 minute and 43 seconds later, at 9:01 a.m., my job officially ended, and so did Harrington Biotech's eligibility for $12.4 million in federal funds. The library's old fluorescent light buzzed above me, humming like it knew a secret. I logged out, shut the terminal, and walked out into the morning sun like I'd just returned a book. Across town, in some temperature-controlled server room at the Federal Liaison's office, an alert flashed red. GR61, revoked by primary officer. Project Harrington Biotech, status flagged. No one at the library heard it, but I liked to imagine it made a sound. A quiet hum, like the split second before a power grid goes dark. Meanwhile, at Harrington, they were probably starting their Tuesday stand-up. Travis, pacing in front of a whiteboard, tossing around buzzwords like momentum and ownership. Maybe Brian was still fumbling through the portal, trying to resubmit a form he wasn't authorized to open. Maybe legal was sipping their cold brew, blissfully unaware that in 6 hours, someone from the federal office in D.C. would be calling their main line. By 11:27 a.m., that call had turned into an email. Subject: Temporary Suspension Notification, Federal Grants Division. The message was clinical and short. Due to a revoked GR61 attestation and absence of a registered compliance officer, Harrington Biotech's eligibility to receive and utilize federal funds is temporarily suspended. Effective immediately. That line hit their server like a hammer. At 11:30, Rachel's smartwatch pinged. "You're trending," she texted me, followed by a screenshot of the boardroom Slack thread. "Travis says it's just paperwork. Board looks like they swallowed a stapler." Travis, apparently, stood in front of the executive team and waved the issue away. "It's a minor clerical delay," he said. "We'll have Brian re-upload by close of business." The room didn't buy it. One of the senior board members actually asked, "What's a GR61?" And Travis launched into a half-baked TED Talk about compliance modernization. Legal winced. Ops looked nauseous. Meanwhile, I was on my apartment balcony, laptop open, hair still damp from the shower, watching the inbox refresh. A polite chime echoed. New message. Consulting inquiry. Federal Grants Division. "Ms. Price," it began, "given your extensive familiarity with the GR61 process and prior role at Harrington Biotech, we would like to discuss a short-term consulting engagement to assist with compliance stabilization. 8 years of being the quiet one, the detail-oriented gal in compliance, and suddenly, I was their solution." I sat there, sipping coffee, the irony so thick it could have been spread on toast. By mid-afternoon, Harrington was unraveling in real time. The lab director froze a $1.1 million procurement because the vendor portal flagged their ID as non-compliant. The research team had to stop their gene editing trial. No active grant, no legal permission to touch the samples. Even their catering account for the Friday lunch got canceled because the card was tied to the same grant budget. Rachel's next message read, "Travis is screaming into a speakerphone in legal's office. According to her, he was arguing with someone from the Federal Liaison's office, insisting, 'I'm the vice president.' To which the agent reportedly replied, 'Not of compliance, sir.' I didn't laugh. Not yet. There's a line between satisfaction and spectacle. I stayed on the balcony, calm, quiet, and methodical, because this wasn't revenge. It was procedure. Wednesday morning, the chaos metastasized. Harrington's research lab was frozen mid-cycle. Incubators still running, experiments half complete. 2 lab mice reportedly died because their treatment batch couldn't be released without the compliance funding tag. Tragic, but poetic. At 8:11 a.m., A $950,000 shipment of biotech materials sat trapped at Newark Customs. The freight company's algorithm automatically blocked release. No valid clearance ID, no override. The crates sat under tarps while some intern tried to Google how to unfreeze federal shipments. In the procurement Slack thread, Brian typed his last message. "This is above my pay grade. I never got training. I'm out." Then he nuked his account, turned in his badge, and disappeared like a ghost with a student loan. By 9 o'clock, HR confirmed Brian's resignation. By 9:15, legal realized they weren't just dealing with a delay. They were dealing with an investigation. Because when the feds flag something pending review, that's bureaucratic code for we're sharpening the knives. By the time the word investigation hit legal's inbox, the panic had already taken root. At 10:07 a.m., Travis called what he termed an alignment huddle. Translation, a desperate emergency meeting, and locked himself in the glass-walled conference room with legal, finance, and HR. Someone scrawled crisis equal opportunity on the whiteboard. 6 minutes later, someone else crossed out opportunity and just wrote crisis. Rachel texted me a photo. I nearly spit out my coffee. From my end, I watched the meltdown unfold like a paid subscription. The grant freeze made it onto a niche science blog I followed. Buried halfway through a dry paragraph was the line, "Harrington Biotech, recipient of a $12.4 nm federal research grant, has temporarily suspended operations following a revoked compliance filing." I forwarded it to my sister with the subject line, "Guess who's trending?" She replied with a gif of a woman eating popcorn in a ball gown. Travis, meanwhile, was pacing so hard the Apple Watch on his wrist thought he was doing cardio. His precious agile operation had come to a screeching bureaucratic halt. Procurement was offline, research idle, and vendors were ghosting his emails. Legal had stopped responding in writing, HR refused to pick up calls, and finance was quietly drafting clawback scenarios. Rachel told me the phrase, Title 18, exposure had been whispered. That's legalese for you might go to court. By Wednesday evening, Travis had stopped pretending to lead and started trying to survive. He begged legal to expedite the registration of a new compliance officer. Legal, voice flat, explained that clearance required federal vetting, background checks, and agency onboarding. Best case scenario, 90 days. Worst case, 6 months, depending on the investigation's findings. Translation: Harrington Biotech was dead in the water. Thursday morning, 8 o'clock a.m. Sharp. The board assembled on the 17th floor. No muffins, no catered coffee, just silence and the faint buzz of air conditioning. The chairman walked in late, face like carved marble. He didn't speak, just nodded toward the door. That's when the compliance auditor entered. A man in a gray government suit 2 sizes too big, holding a single manila folder like it was a weapon. He didn't shake hands, didn't sit down. He opened the folder, placed a paper on the table, and said, Form GR61, signed by Lauren Price on April 9th, 7:42 a.m. Rescinded by the same officer on April 16th, 8:59 a.m. Severance effective 9:01 a.m. He laid down both pages like a blackjack dealer revealing an ace. That means your eligibility to use federal grant funds ended the moment Ms. Price's employment was terminated. Any use of those funds since that time is subject to audit, reclassification, and potential misappropriation under Title 18. The room went dead. The CFO's pen rolled off the table. No one picked it up. The chairman's voice was low but cutting. We were under the impression the form had already been accepted. Submission, said the auditor, is not activation. Activation requires continued employment of the registered officer. Travis finally found his voice. We reassigned the role. Brian Carter. He submitted a new one. The auditor blinked once. Mr. Carter was not a registered compliance officer. His submission was automatically rejected. He also resigned yesterday. A single groan escaped someone at the far end. The HR director looked like she wanted to dissolve into the carpet. The chairman turned slowly. Who fired Lauren Price? HR stammered. Travis cut in too quickly. It was a collective decision. We discussed redundancies. The chairman's eyebrow rose. A collective decision? Who signed the paperwork? Silence. Then HR, voice barely above a whisper. Travis submitted the termination form. He approved the timestamp. The shift in the room was seismic. All eyes landed on him. He tried to speak, but only managed a weak, "It was procedural. I thought legal was looped in." Legal's response was a slow exhale. We were not informed until 2 days later. The chairman tapped the GR61 with one finger. You erased the only person keeping this company federally compliant. Travis's jaw clenched. A bead of sweat slid down his temple and hit the paper, smudging my signature. The chairman leaned back in his chair, fingers steepled beneath his chin, the kind of posture that meant the execution was already scheduled and only the formalities remained. Nobody in that glass box moved. Legal's pen stopped mid-scribble. HR's face had gone the color of printer paper, and even the CFO, normally smug enough to correct people's grammar during earnings calls, was gripping his stress ball like it owed him money. The silence didn't feel empty. It felt dense, like the air right before a thunderclap. The chairman spoke again, slow and deliberate. You signed her termination, Morgan. You authorized the removal of the only credentialed compliance officer in this company without consulting legal or verifying the recertification process. Travis opened his mouth. Nothing came out. He swallowed hard, his Adam's apple bobbing like he'd just swallowed a stapler. Sir, I was told we could reassign internally. By whom? Travis hesitated. His eyes flicked toward HR, then to legal, then back down at the table. It was understood. Understood by whom? The chairman repeated, sharper this time. Nobody answered. The auditor cleared his throat and snapped the manila folder closed. Until a new compliance officer is federally approved, your grant remains frozen. Use of those funds, even internally, could constitute fraud under Title 18. A formal investigation is open. Our office recommends immediate suspension of all project activities until legal review concludes. He tucked the folder beneath his arm, turned on his heel, and walked out without another word. The click of his orthopedic shoes echoed through the hall like a countdown clock. For a long moment, no one spoke. Then, from the far end of the table, the CFO muttered what everyone was thinking. We're screwed. The chairman didn't respond. He just stared at Travis. The look wasn't anger. It was exhaustion, disappointment distilled into human form. You've put this entire company at risk, he said finally. And for what? Optics? Travis didn't answer. He couldn't. The weight of his own arrogance had finally collapsed in on itself. The chairman stood, gathering the GR61 form and holding it up. This piece of paper, he said, represents $12.4 million in active federal funding, now suspended. And the name on it, Lauren Price, was the only one that mattered. You fired her. You, personally. Congratulations. At that exact moment, the large conference screen at the end of the table flickered to life. A government-issued Zoom interface appeared, all muted blue tones and bureaucratic precision. The face on screen belonged to Vanessa Green, the federal grants liaison, the same woman who had emailed me less than 24 hours earlier. Her expression was the kind that could make a room full of executives shrink 2 inches. This meeting, she said crisply, is being recorded. The chairman didn't even flinch. We're listening, Ms. Green. She adjusted her glasses and began reading from her notes. Our office has opened an official investigation into Harrington Biotech for potential violations under Title 18, subsection 101, false statements in matters within federal jurisdiction. The revoked GR61 form submitted under a terminated employee's name constitutes a material misrepresentation. Until further notice, your access to federal systems is frozen. Any additional submissions or edits will be considered interference with an active federal review. HR blanched. Legal scribbled faster. The CFO rubbed his temples like he was trying to erase reality. Travis's voice cracked. "Ms. Green, this must be a misunderstanding. We were simply—" The chairman raised a single finger. "Quiet," Vanessa continued, unbothered. "Our system still lists Ms. Lauren Price as the sole registered compliance officer for Harrington Biotech. There is no replacement on file, no pending clearance request. Should Ms. Price be willing, we are prepared to re-engage her through appropriate consulting channels." And then the screen went black. Nobody moved. The chairman slowly turned toward Travis. "Get her on the phone," he said. Travis sat frozen, pale and sweating through his dress shirt. His lips parted, but no sound came. The rest of the room looked away. Legal, HR, finance. Everyone silently abandoning him. The silence was so heavy, it felt like the air itself was judging him. Meanwhile, 5 miles away, I sat on my balcony in sweatpants and an old conference t-shirt, sipping coffee that still steamed in the morning air. My laptop chimed. New email. Subject: Consulting engagement, priority urgent. "Lauren," it read, "if you're available, the board would like to discuss immediate terms. Timeline is sensitive." I didn't smile, didn't laugh, didn't gloat. I just took another sip, watched a pigeon crap on the neighbor's Tesla, and let the quiet settle. This wasn't revenge. This was compliance. Cold, clean, permanent. And unlike Travis, I didn't need a team to execute it. Just a clock, a form, and the understanding that sometimes the quiet ones aren't just holding the keys. They are the lock. The boardroom stayed silent long after Vanessa's face vanished from the screen. You could practically hear the collective heartbeat of 6 executives trying to remember how breathing worked. Legal shuffled a stack of blank pages, pretending to find something important. HR's eyes were glassy, fixed on the floor. The CFO was staring at the wall like he'd just seen the ghost of his bonus float away. The chairman didn't move. He just kept his gaze on Travis, the way a judge studies a defendant who's already confessed. Finally, the silence broke. "Mr. Morgan," the chairman said, voice low but steady, "you have single-handedly jeopardized our federal funding, our reputation, and the employment of 200 people. Travis tried to steady himself. "Sir, I didn't. This wasn't intentional." The chairman cut him off. "Intent doesn't matter. You fired a federally registered officer without legal clearance. You ignored procedure, ignored chain of command, and dismissed every warning sign because you thought you understood the system better than the person who built it." Travis's throat clicked when he swallowed. The room was still so quiet you could hear the faint hum of the ceiling vents. "Effective immediately," the chairman continued. "You are suspended pending legal review. HR will escort you out." Travis blinked like the words hadn't processed. "You can't." The chairman didn't even look at him. "Security will collect your badge." That was it. No yelling, no theatrics, just administrative precision. The same kind I'd spent 8 years perfecting. He stood up, shoulders slumped. The color drained from his face. When the door clicked shut behind him, the CFO let out a slow, ragged breath. "Well," he muttered, "there goes the modernization initiative." No one laughed. Meanwhile, I was exactly where I wanted to be, on my small apartment balcony overlooking the street below. The world outside looked so ordinary. Delivery trucks, joggers, the hum of distant traffic. No one would have guessed that, across town, a multi-million-dollar operation was imploding in real time. My phone buzzed again. Another email from the board. Subject: Urgent call request. Consulting engagement proposal. They didn't even bother with pleasantries this time. Lauren, we require your immediate availability to assist in compliance reinstatement. Compensation negotiable. I didn't answer. Not yet. Instead, I leaned back, took a sip of coffee, and thought about how neat it all was. The system didn't need fire, or fury, or revenge. It needed understanding. It needed patience. Bureaucracy is slow, but when it turns with the weight of law. By mid-afternoon, Rachel messaged again. "You should see this," she wrote, attaching a picture. It was Travis, walking out of the building, jacket slung over his arm, face pale, escorted by HR. Underneath, she added a simple caption: "Justice served cold." I stared at the photo for a long moment. Then, finally, I smiled. Not wide, not triumphant, just quiet satisfaction. That evening, Harrington Biotech's internal memo leaked to the press. Vice President removed following federal compliance suspension. The headline was buried under 3 layers of tech gossip, but it was enough. 1,000 unread messages later, my LinkedIn inbox was full. Recruiters, consultants, and 2 federal contractors who apparently admired my procedural integrity. The same people who'd ignored my process improvement memos for years were now quoting them back at me. The next morning, at precisely 9 a.m., I joined a video call with Vanessa Green. She didn't waste time. "Lauren," she said, "we'd like you to serve as an external consultant during the compliance transition period. You'll report directly to the Federal Oversight Office, not Harrington. You'll be compensated accordingly." "Understood," I said. "And Travis?" Her mouth twitched, almost a smile. "Mr. Morgan will not be part of the remediation process." The contract arrived an hour later. 3 pages, clean, concise, signed by people who finally understood the value of procedure. As I signed my name, Lauren Price, compliance consultant, I felt nothing but calm. Not vengeance, not triumph, just closure. Because in the end, revenge wasn't my job. Compliance was. And sometimes, when you do your job too well, the system itself handles the revenge for you. The consulting contract came through at 10:42 a.m. Sharp, attached to an email titled Urgent Reinstatement Agreement. Federal Oversight Collaboration. I opened it on my kitchen table, the same one that still had coffee rings and a half-eaten bagel on it. 3 pages, direct and surgical. Outline of responsibilities, federal non-disclosure clauses, timeline for reinstatement, and an hourly rate that almost made me laugh out loud. It was more than I'd made in a month at Harrington. That's the thing about bureaucracy. When it breaks, the ones who understand how it was built suddenly become priceless. I clicked sign, watched the cursor spin for half a second, and exhaled. The circle turned green. Done. Just like that, I was back in the system. Not as an employee, but as the person the system trusted to clean up the mess. An hour later, Vanessa called. "Miss Price, thank you for your prompt response," she said in that efficient tone government officials use when they're saying, "You saved our week. We'll be coordinating directly with the board for access. You'll have remote clearance reinstated by end of day. Expect chaos on their end." "I'd be disappointed if there wasn't," I replied. She laughed softly. "Good attitude. You'll need it." By 2 p.m., my inbox looked like a disaster site. Harrington's legal team was trying to sound cooperative, the board was trying to sound calm, and HR was just trying not to cry. Every thread was a fire drill disguised as professionalism. "Can we expedite the clearance paperwork?" "No." "Can we reassign internally?" Also no. "Can Ms. Price confirm whether the revoked GR61 can be reinstated retroactively?" Definitely not. Once rescinded, it was void until refiled under a certified officer. Me, now, technically, but only under federal supervision. That was the irony. They could have just kept me. Instead, they'd now have to pay for me twice. By Thursday, the headlines had started to circulate through industry channels. Federal oversight halts, Harrington Biotech funding, over compliance breach. Buried in the second paragraph was my name, former compliance officer Lauren Price, now serving as an independent consultant during the investigation. The calls started before noon. Vendors, journalists, and a couple of old coworkers who suddenly always believed in me. Rachel messaged again. Board looks like they aged a decade overnight. Travis's office is empty. The chair called your hiring the smartest decision they've made all year. Then she added, "You coming back to the office?" I stared at the message. "No," I typed, "but I'll see them soon enough." That night, I drove past Harrington's downtown tower on my way home from dinner. The building was still lit like nothing had changed. Cubicles glowing, monitors flickering, people walking briskly between meetings that probably no longer mattered. From the outside, it looked alive. From the inside, I knew it was hollow. The next morning, my temporary credentials went live. I logged into the federal system with my new consultant tag, L. Price, ex-Tacon 0194. It felt different now, not as an employee trying to prove her worth, but as the person whose authority was now backed by the very agency they'd tried to sidestep. I opened the new GR61 template. Blank fields, fresh timestamps, full control. By 9:30, I was on a call with the board, Vanessa, and 2 government auditors. The meeting opened with the same sterile corporate greetings, but underneath the politeness, you could feel the tension crackle. The chairman was composed, but the rest looked like they hadn't slept. "Ms. Price," Vanessa began, "we're here to finalize corrective steps. You'll be advising on documentation and procedural restoration." "Of course," I said. My camera stayed off. Let them hear me, not see me. Travis's name was never mentioned, but his absence hung heavy. Someone from HR quietly said they were reevaluating management structure. I didn't ask. I didn't need to. The system had already done what it does best: purge incompetence through paperwork. When the meeting ended, Vanessa stayed on for a moment. "You handled this with restraint," she said. "Most people would have reacted differently." "I don't do reactions," I replied. "I do regulations." She smiled faintly. "That's why we hired you." And that was that. No confetti, no victory speech. Just the quiet hum of justice written in procedural language and timestamps.